Welcome back to the Lantern Sports Podcast, Episode 10, hosted by the Lantern Sports Desk here at The Ohio State University. I'm Steven Kishpaugh, Assistant Sports Editor to the Lantern. Joining me as always, and to my left, we have LTV Sports Producer Casey Smith. Across from me, we have Lantern Sports Editor Jacob Bench, and to my right, LTV Assistant Sports Producer Gabe Burgraff. Gentlemen, 10th episode, pretty exciting stuff. Before we kind of get into what we saw last night, after the unveiling of the first college football playoff rankings, of course, we just want to give a quick rundown around Ohio State athletics. The field hockey team, for the first time in 9 years, is hosting the Big Ten tournament. The team finished 11-7 overall and are led by goalkeeper Abby Danson, who leads the Big Ten with a save percentage of .800 on the dot. They played number 2 Maryland to open the tournament, and recently fifth-year midfielder Emma Goldine, was named second-team All-Big Ten, while graduate Grace Kim was named the sportsmanship honoree. For both hockey teams last weekend, it was quite eventful. The number 11 men's hockey team and the number 1 women's ice hockey teams both played Minnesota last weekend, and they both split their respective series. For the cross-country team, on the women's side, Addie Engel won the individual Big Ten championship, which is the first individual title in program history, while the women's team placed 4th overall. Addie Engel, Daniela Santos, and Andrea Kuhn all earned all Big Ten honors after finishing in the top 7, while the men's team finished 8th. And then finally, for men's golf, junior Adam Wallen won the Big Ten Men's Golfer of the Week award after winning the Cal Poly Collegiate Tourney over the weekend. His performance allowed OSU to also capture the victory in the team aspect as well. So be sure to follow Lantern Sports on Twitter and at the Lantern OSU on social media for all coverage of Ohio State athletics from us and the rest of our talented writers and staff. So this weekend, it's going to be. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Northwestern kind of stinks, to put it mildly. To be quite honest, there's not a lot I like about what I see from this team. But Jacob, you were able to go to availability, as you are every week. What did you hear from Ryan Day, and then what did you hear just about how they're previewing this game and kind of what they're looking forward to?
Yeah, it was not too much focus on the matchup at hand. We got a little glimpse of the CFP talk during Ryan Day's press conference that I always enjoy every week, getting to hear from Jim Knowles and Brian Hartline as well. We got to hear a little bit of insight on how Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison are kind of evolving in their first years as starters. And, Brian Hartline puts it out there. It's not a surprise how well Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison have performed for Ohio State this season. Of course, the two of them really anchored it there, both on each sideline there. And we really saw how special Marvin Harrison Jr. can be when Ohio State played Penn State last weekend, because when Ohio State needed a first down or it needed a play, C.J. Stroud dumped it off right there to Marvin Harrison for, it seemed like, a short gain, but they ended up being 20-yard gains, and it would set up Ohio State there in the middle of the field and would set up Ohio State's offense there. But the college football playoff top 25 came out on Tuesday, the first edition for this season. I think there were some teams in there that have surprised even the four of us. So really
which
ready
ones, Jacob?
to dive in there. Perhaps the team at the top, and it's not Ohio State.
So you don't think Clemson's you don't think Clemson's number 4, but do you think Tennessee's number 1?
So I think Tennessee's number 1. Sure, I'll go ahead and back it. We'll say the Vols are the number 1 team. Indeed, man, I'm going to be watching that game there.
Yeah, we'll be on the road back from Evanston, Illinois. Probably tune into CBS 3:30 kick. Obviously, keeping our eyes on the road. We'll be listening to it over the radio. But Gabe, what do you make of this Ohio State team going into Evanston? They've had a run of dominance against the Wildcats recently. Just what do you make of the Buckeyes at that number 2 spot going against – I saw an article from Ryan McGee on ESPN, and Northwestern's one of the 10 worst teams in the FBS, and Ohio State's the second best, according to the college football playoff. So what are you expecting from this weekend?
Well, Ohio State is number 2, and I think it's fair to say Northwestern will not be getting their second win of the season this Saturday. But looking at the tail of the tape for Pat Fitzgerald, it's just not been – an easy go against the Buckeyes. 0-9 on his career. So we'll have to see if that double-digit mark is the same as 2019 when it was 52-3 and the Buckeyes just rolled all over them the last time they were at Ryan Field. But really what I've seen from Ohio State is the security blanket we saw at Penn State was Marvin Harrison Jr. 10 catches, 10 first downs, over 180 yards, really being the guy that they need to go to when the going got tough and that run game really wasn't moving. A lot of slants, kind of reminded me a lot of Mike Thomas. Drew Brees, Mike Thomas combo between Stroud and Harrison Jr. Just when you need a first down, he's going to be the guy that's going to be there because he's big. He's got a big body to shield the ball, and he made a couple tough catches. One play, he made a tough catch, and it ended up looking like he might have landed on his shoulder a little bit and got a little banged up, but he was right back in and making big plays all evening.
Right, and I mean, you talk about Pat Fitzgerald being 0 for 9. He's not alone in the long pedigree of Northwestern coaching. Ohio State's only lost against Northwestern once since 1972, and that was a 33-27 loss in Evanston. I mean, what does Ohio State need to do? I mean, are they just going to out-athlete Northwestern this weekend?
Well, I don't like the thinking that like some team is going to out-athlete another team solely based on the fact that, to be at the collegiate level, you have to be an elite player to begin with. But I do see what you're saying with.
But I mean, talent prevails.
But
right?
yes, so there's a famous saying amongst college football Twitter users, and it's that stars matter. Stars matter, and I mean, I don't have to pull up a graph to show you guys like the amount of 5 stars and the amount of top 5 recruiting classes that Ryan Day has been able to haul in over his tenure. And for Northwestern, that's really not the blueprint of their program. They're more of a kind of development here, be as tough as you can, and show signs of improvement through all 4 years where you can get to that level. But it's not like Northwestern is made up with a bunch of experienced seniors. Like, they have inexperience on that field too. And I mean, they have one of the best offensive linemen in my opinion. And pardon me if I butcher this last name, but Peter Skorinski. He's one of the top tackle prospects in the NFL draft, and he's generally regarded as a great prospect. But he alone is not going to be able to stop someone like JT Tuimoloau from just taking over the game on defense to the point where the offense hardly even needs to try.
Well, even if he does take care of JT, you got Zach Harrison, you got Jack Sawyer, and now that JT's kind of emerged as that guy with a great historic defensive performance, it'll be on the rest of that defense to see what they can do, because that secondary looked a little bit shaky at times. Parker Washington had a ginormous day, and he was carving that secondary up and really extending a lot of those Penn State drives to keep them in it. And really, what's he blocking for? They've had multiple quarterbacks. They've had, Hull has not really steered the ship in the right direction for the Wildcats. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what they can do on offense, because I think a lot of people expect them not to be able to match the firepower Ohio State obviously has and has put on display.
Yeah, and with this Northwestern offense, I mean, listen, a couple of weeks ago, I in simple terms ragged all over Iowa's offense, just how putrid it looked. And then they go to Northwestern, and my goodness, it's like it's a whole new team. 33-13 win. They had multiple touchdowns, and you come to expect Iowa as this laughable offense that's not able to move the ball. But they are a talented team, and you saw what they were able to do against Northwestern. And Northwestern, I mean, it's not like they're on offense they're able to do much. They're 120th in the FBS in points per game at only 17.9, and their defense doesn't do them any favors, giving up 28.8. And like I said before about JT Tuimoloau, if they're game planning for him, expect the other defensive linemen to just start feasting all over the offensive line and presumed quarterback Ryan Helinski.
Right. I mean, you were talking about some of those other guys being able to feast. Zach Harrison's sort of the guy that I've kept my eye on. He's really come around these last couple weeks into sort of that player that he was expected to be coming out of high school as one of the top defensive recruits Ohio State's ever gotten. I mean, he's graded out on Pro Football Focus. Against Iowa, he had a 98.6 grade. That's right at level temperature for the body temperature. That's great for a defensive grade against Penn State. Grade out at 66.4 for his rating, which, I mean, is still pretty good in the grand scheme of things. Like, their ratings, I mean, hey, if you're 2 for 3, you're in the Hall of Fame. You're the greatest baseball player ever, right? Right, Jacob? I know you like that.
I do know.
Zach Harrison came away with a big interception thanks to JT a week ago, and that's sort of been his MO. Just, I mean, even if he's not getting to the quarterback, getting a hand up there and knocking down passes, and he's really made sort of an impact that people in Columbus and at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center have expected him to when he was coming in as a freshman.
And like you mentioned that he kind of had to drop off in that Pro Football Focus grade against Penn State. I just wanted to mention that they do good work there, but, obviously, watching the game, context matters. And there was a lot of times during that game where, to be fair to the referees, they were not very flag happy on Saturday, and at least from my view, because, on both sides, I saw a couple of holds, and Zach Harrison, I mean, he was definitely held a couple of times solely because it was either let him through or let JT Tuimoloau out through, and, they kind of gave a Penn State pick your poison, and, it worked out that, Tuimoloau had arguably the best defensive single game performance in Ohio State history. But, we've talked a lot about defensive performance, but I want to throw this is your guys' favorite term. I want to throw a nugget out there for just context. So Ohio State, obviously, they pass the ball a lot, and currently Northwestern's 2 leading receivers of Malik Washington and running back Evan Hull are combined 88 receptions, 931 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And then you look at somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr. by himself, and the comparison, like, it doesn't look like they're playing the same sport. This season, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s put up 10 touchdowns, only 48 receptions, but he has 783 yards by himself. So, the production between Ohio State's playmakers and Northwestern's playmakers is so vast in my opinion.
The one Ohio State playmaker I'm keeping my eye on this weekend is Travion Henderson. Ohio State, they've struggled in the recent weeks to sort of establish the run game, and Ryan Day was asked about that. Is he tipping his hand by going from the pistol or under center? Because Ohio State, they're very run happy in those formations. So Ryan Day's explanation was, if you're lined up in the pistol with the running back right behind C.J. Stroud, they could go right, they could go left. It kind of keeps the defense honest in that sense. And he also said Travion Henderson likes getting downhill and lining up a little bit deeper. I mean, with that being said, though, Ohio State sort of had their way running the ball against Northwestern. And I see Ryan Day as sort of stubborn in the sense and always wanting to prove something. I mean, against Michigan last year and all throughout the offseason, his team gets called soft. What does he do on the goal line? He's lining up in jumbo formations, trying to show, hey, we need a yard. Everybody in the stadium knows we need a yard. We're going to line up with an extra offensive lineman. We're going to put a fullback in there, and we're just going to pound it down your throat. So I think Ohio State and Ryan Day, they really want to prove that they can run the football, and I think you'll see that this week.
And you speak of those goal line stands there. Ohio State had its first red zone opportunity not convert for a score against Penn State, the first one all season. I think that's something that Ohio State's really done well of. Once it's getting down there near that red area, that goal line stand right there, Ohio State is finding a way to find some open field, confuse the opposition, and I really like the way some of the blocks have gone about with Cade Stover and just some of the workings they've done with the tight end there and those packages down near the goal line.
You can put a little asterisk next to that one, though, because it was only, second down when C.J. Stroud got sacked, and that ended the half, and technically they didn't convert, even though you can assume Noah Ruggles would have booted through the field goal, the chip shot. So you got to put a little asterisk next to that one. But, I mean, you make a great point. They did that a lot with Jeremy Ruckert last year as well. They do sort of inside zone reads and then pull Jeremy Ruckert across the formation and just seal the edge while the offensive line is just trying to block their man, whether they're going to slide protection, anything of that sort. So, yeah, you make a great point there. But just for the viewers out there, Ohio State, in all fairness, probably barring a disaster, would still be the only perfect team to score every single time they go to the red zone this year.
Well, I believe there were a couple of flags that stand too, right? A couple of false starts, maybe. Or was that later on in
not
the
that
game?
stand? That was later on, I
was later
believe.
on in the game.
Those were on a couple 2-point conversions.
Yep.
And they backed them up, and then they'd have to elect for the extra point.
And of course, you had the 3-play saga where Penn State lined up for field goal, made it, penalty on Penn State. Then they lined up, missed it, penalty on Ohio State over the center, and then finally they come in and fourth down. They come in a jumbo set. And what I really liked from them is they'd come in a jumbo set, get Ohio State in a package, and then they'd spread it all out. They'd go either 4 or 5 wide, and then you got Steel Chambers on, I believe, a fullback. But they had confidence throwing at Steel Chambers to a fullback on 4th and short and getting the matchup that they wanted. That's something that I look at, not so much Northwestern, but going down the road. If you get a team like Tennessee or Georgia or Michigan even who have athletic big guys that you can sub in the jumbo, and they can block and they can catch passes, kind of box out those slower linebackers, that might be a weakness in this Ohio State defense.
Right, and I think the one big thing against a team like Northwestern, you're supposed to dominate. You're almost a 40-point favorite. I mean, you're supposed to dominate this game. You're supposed to win big. Just play clean football. Limit the penalties, limit the turnovers, and just do you, and show that you have just the better talent on your roster. I remember a couple years ago, I believe it was Lane Kiffin when he was at FAU said playing Ohio State was like Ohio State having the first 90 picks on the playground at recess. This is one of those games where you have to show that and show that you have the better talent and kind of get back to your MO and maybe use it sort of as a tune-up game. I mean, in the longest yard, they were talking about the prisons versus the guards, and the guards, they had to go play this big football game or whatever. They play the prisoners as sort of the tune-up game as Paul Crewe, played by Adam Sandler, or Burt Reynolds, depending on which version you're watching. They got to go play this tune-up game and sort of impose your will, if you will.
And I think, looking at the slate this weekend, this kind of game for Ohio State could not have come at a better time because, with the college football playoff rankings dropping and, a lot of contention, I could say the least, with the opinions of the rankings. There's just, with the new rankings, there's now a lot of high-profile matchups, but Ohio State and TCU, they kind of have those gimme tune-up games, but, at the end of the day, you still need to go out on the field and perform. We can talk all this, but if something were to happen where Ohio State just forgot their ability to play football, then in Northwestern was able to win, then it's not a tune-up game, and we're talking here next week about what went wrong for Ohio State.
And that's the thing about college football that's so amazing to watch, games like that, and college kids go out there and go on the road and perform, is this game at State College, this was 21, I believe, 16 in the fourth quarter, and Ohio State had not found that gear to shift into to get anything into the end zone. So we were sitting there, is this going to be the day that the offense sputters and it's kind of Armageddon for Ohio State because you still got to go play Michigan, and they found a way to win that game, just win the game. A win's a win, and that's the thing. On the road, in that environment, it was loud in Beaver Stadium, and you could feel the tension in the fourth quarter. And C.J. Stroud and that offense stepped up a couple of crucial drives. Of course, JT had that pick 6 at the end to kind of elongate it, but they went up in the blink of an eye. They were down, and then I believe it was touchdown, turnover, 2-possession game. And that's the thing that this Ohio State team can do. It's just, can they consistently score against some of these top programs? And Michigan is going to have their eye on slowing them down enough to have them within striking distance.
Right, and you talk about Ohio State turning it on. They did that against Iowa 2 weeks ago, as well. It was sort of close there, and then Ohio State goes out and puts up 4 touchdowns in the second half. I believe that didn't allow an Iowa point in the second half as well.
Correct.
In that 54-10 route. So Ohio State, you can always point to Jim Knowles to be able to make adjustments. But to see Ryan Day sort of adjust, and I mean, everybody wants to say, why are you running the bubble screens? Why are you not going vertical with the ball? Which I agree. But people can think of a bubble screen or a screen in general as pretty much a thrown run play, if you will. Same thing with a jet sweep, an end around, a pop pass. If you're not getting the ground game going, maybe you try and stretch it to the boundary, and I think that's what Ryan Day was trying to do. Essentially use that as a run while getting the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. Some of those, like one I saw, I believe it was either to Julian Fleming or Xavier Johnson, the wide receivers just didn't block. So that's sort of a failed bubble screen, and everybody's pointing to why are you not going down the field. I think with C.J. Stroud being now getting into the conversation of greatest Ohio State quarterback ever, I think you should be able to put the ball in his hands and be able to say, here, we're going to run 15-yard digs, we're going to run out routes, we're going to run posts. You know all the route combinations. You've done it for 2 years now, 20 games under your belt. Go out and do it. Let's go win this game.
My thought there, though, is also, you've got guys blocking and catching the ball in those situations that would be blocking for Jackson Smith and Jigba, one of your shiftier guys. And I mean, the thought is, right, you're trying to establish some sort of run game on the outside when you can't get it going through the handoff, and Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams as well is something to see who they have available, especially if Travion is their bell back. Maybe some Dallin Hayden carries, because we saw at Michigan State when that happened and he wasn't available. He got dinged up. He got hit hard early in the second half, and you kind of had to maintain some of that run game. I absolutely agree with what you said about Ryan Day, though. And also, on the road, really the first test. Michigan State was the first road game.
Dude. I thought you were talking about Northwestern being the first test.
No.
Were you not down there on the field 108,000 strong?
Exactly. And that was one of the things. Maybe that's part of the reason also is you just want to get him in rhythm, taking the snap, dropping back, hitting an easy target where you don't have to dissect a good Penn State secondary that played pretty well. Outside of allowing Marvin Harrison Jr. to go off like that, really no big plays outside of the Emeka Egbuka catch at the very end, where very gutsy play call, third down, clock running out, Egbuka down the seam to kind of ice that game and set up that Travion final touchdown. But no, I think it's really interesting going over the X's and O's and seeing how maybe a certain script pans out on the road, depending on where it is. But Ryan Day, like you said, made good adjustments, and in the end, they came out with a victory, and the offense showed what it can do in basically 8 minutes.
And before we kind of wrap it up here, I just wanted to mention that while I was watching that Penn State game over the weekend, there were times when I was thinking about, what if Tennessee was on the field right now? Or what if Alabama was on the field right now, matched up against Ohio State? And I was seeing places where, like you said, Gabe, the secondary, where somebody like Jalen Hyatt could absolutely feast if he was, able to find space, and the secondary looked like it did against Penn State. But, at the end of the day, now that the official playoff rankings are out, it's not really about, hypotheticals anymore. It's about all right, well, let me just preface this by saying the committee's kind of iffy with their standards on how they rank, but usually the idea is the team with the best resume should be in the top 4. But at the same time, you look at resumes and you wonder how is an Alabama ranked ahead of a TCU, or how is a Clemson ranked ahead of a Michigan? So, with these just being the initial rankings, it's not time to panic at all. But I think this is definitely a wake-up call for teams fighting for this playoff spot. Hey, resume building matters at this point, because they're not going to be impressed by a 28-10 win over Northwestern. It needs to be 66-3.
Right, and that was the point I was going to get at. With 1v3 this weekend, you got to assume, obviously, if Tennessee wins, they're going to stay at number 1. If Georgia wins, they just scored arguably a better win than Tennessee had against Alabama. So you got to think they jump to 1. Does that influence Ryan Day a little to keep the starters in a little bit longer to sort of punish Northwestern into the ground? Because, I mean, if it's a sloppy game down in Athens and Ohio State comes out and they're firing on all cylinders and they win, sort of like you said, with like a 60-point margin or so, you got to think they go to number 1, and he's striving to get to number 1, get those style points so you can choose where you play in the postseason.
And, it's difficult to, see that happening. It's tough because with Tennessee and Georgia, as you mentioned, the victor of that game is going to have a number 1 victory in their pocket. It's so hard to see Ohio State maybe jumping over that for me personally. But the onus, I mean, you look at just past the CFP and the top 4, Michigan there at number 5. How about that for November 26th? Michigan is the first team out. Michigan comes to Columbus this year. So I think it makes that last final regular season meeting there maybe even a little bit more, a little added bonus, a little added juice there with Michigan being on the outside looking in.
I think it's very realistic. The only way Ohio State, potentially the best way for Ohio State to be the number 1 seed in the CFP at the end of the year, is for them to be undefeated, win the Big Ten, and for there to be 3 one-loss SEC teams at the end of that schedule. Because realistically, Georgia wins or Tennessee wins, even if they lose the SEC championship, they're going to be 1 until that game. And then if Alabama or whoever is a one-loss victor over them, they're going to have a win over, at that time, the number 1 team in the country. So it all comes down to what happens on the field, but Ohio State just needs to keep winning. And I think as the committee has shown, they've displayed that they're the number 2 team in the country in the committee's eyes as of right now. And if Ohio State wins out, it's likely they'll stay at least in that position.
So on that, for the game this weekend, should be a fun one. The spread this week, boys, is 38.5 for Ohio State to win. And, my punt prediction didn't really work last week, but for the spread, I don't like to do this because I picked them 5 times in a row to cover, but I'm picking Ohio State to cover this game again. And I think it'll be somewhere not quite as bad as what I said, but I think it'll be 59-7. And Emeka Ibuka and Kate Stover each catch 2 touchdowns.
Well, as the only correct predictor last week who said Penn State would be in this game with a late score, and that JT touchdown really kind of shocked me. I was like, oh, they're instantly covering. It was like Penn State up 5 and then Ohio State up 20 in the blink of an eye. I think I struck gold, but lightning doesn't really strike twice that often. I think I'm going to take the over. 38, correct?
38.5.
38.5? Oh, that half point makes all the difference considering last time it was 52-3. I think Ohio State puts up 70 in this game. I think it is a 70-10. I'm gonna go 70-10 Buckeyes because, like Casey said, they're not the number 1 team in the country, so they kind of feel that if you really think you're the number 1 team in the country and you have something to prove, this is the game you go out there and do that. Now, that may not happen, but I think that's a good ledge to go out on considering how close this game was at Penn State and kind of that penalty-infused way that it was close. I think you want to put no doubt in anyone's minds that you are a premier threat in the CFP conversation.
Premier threat, CFP conversation. It's
writer,
that time.
I'm a
it's
writer,
that time.
you know?
It's time for score predictions. It sounds like I am not predicting a close game either. I'm predicting at least 60 for Ohio State in this one. I've got 63-10 Ohio State. I'm seeing Ohio State really control the game. They've played well, and we've mentioned the loss at Ryan Field in the past. They've played well recently against Northwestern. This is the first meeting between the 2 of them since the Big Ten championship game during the 2020 season, which there were no fans in the stands. So I'm curious how maybe that little storyline maybe plays out. But I think Ohio State, the run defense for Northwestern kind of intrigues me a little bit. I don't see how Ohio State has too much trouble with them, but I think Ohio State goes in, sets the pace. All the focus Saturday is going to be on Tennessee and Georgia, so Ohio State just needs to really remain a little ho-hum, take care of business, as we've been saying. And, if you want a little prop, how about C.J. Stroud, first rushing touchdown of the season?
Okay,
I like that a lot.
Is that an actual rushing touchdown, or is that like a QB sneak from the one?
Hey, what a rushing touchdown is a rushing touchdown game.
Yes, but if we're getting into the weeds here, you might as well make the odds even better and go full-on rushing or full-on 1 yard plunge. past the line.
When I think of it, I envisioned a scramble rather than like a designed QB sneak or like right there under center. But, like Steven said, rushing touchdown.
All right.
So my big thing is Ohio State, they're going to run the ball. They're going to impose their will. The last 5 games between these two teams, you talked about that 2020 Big Ten Championship. Trey Sermon sets a program record with 331 yards on the ground and 399 yards total for the Buckeyes. 2019, J.K. Dobbins goes for 121. Team goes for 279. 2018, they only get 108 yards on the ground. Oh, that's because Dwayne Haskins threw for what was at the time the program record 499 yards. Other than that, go back to 2016. Mike Weber, 87 yards, 2 touchdowns. J.T. Barrett, 71 yards. Team had 208. Carlos Hyde back in 2013, the Carlos Hyde game. 168 yards, 3 touchdowns, 248 yards total. And I think that'll sort of contribute to maybe a little bit of clock getting taken off, because if you look at the weather report for Evanston, Illinois on Saturday, it's going to be a high of 60, 74% chance of rain in the AM with 24-mile-an-hour winds. So C.J. Stroud, he's not necessarily going to have his way through the air as we can expect, like a typical C.J. Stroud 60-degree weather day would be if it were clear conditions. I think TreVeyon Henderson goes for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I think Ohio State comes away with a 52-10 win. I almost said 13 there.
Ooh.
I almost said 13, but I don't think that last field goal gets blocked.
That's a mega prop bet. But that should do it for episode 10 of the Lantern Sports Podcast. For Casey Smith, Jacob Benj, Gabe Burgraff, I'm Steven Kishpaugh, and we'll catch you in the next episode.